Greetings, everybody. Tonight, we have the privilege of listening to George Chanos talk about the future. George Chanos served as Nevada's 31st Attorney General. He's an author of 2 books, Seize Your Destiny, A Roadmap to Success, and Millennial Samurai, A Mindset for the 21st Century. He's also the chairman of Capri's, one of the fastest growing QSR franchises in the country. Mr. Chanos has been advising clients on how to solve complex problems for over 30 years. Today, he is focused on helping people survive and thrive in what he calls the most extraordinary period in human history. I present to you George Chanos. George.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cindy, and thank you all for giving us your time this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and present to you. Aristotle once said, the man who thinks he knows everything knows nothing at all. And I kind of live by that. I don't profess to have all the answers to anything. In fact, the only thing that I really feel that I know for certain is that there's a great deal that I do not know. So with that caveat, I will tell you what I think I do know about what's happening in the world. If you've been watching, things aren't quite like how they've been through the lives that we've all grown up in. The world is changing very rapidly and radically. And I'm trying to understand today, my focus is on trying to understand what's going on, why it's happening, and what we can expect in the future, and how people can adapt to this radically and rapidly changing environment. So that's really the focus of my writing and my speaking these days. I'm going to share a screen with you for a PowerPoint presentation that I've put together. And can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, Millennial Samurai, A Mindset for the 21st Century is this book. It's a book that I've recently written. It's 444 pages. It's divided into 182 chapters, and the chapters are only 1 to 3 pages each. And the idea of Millennial Samurai is to provide people with a toolkit for the 21st century. Essentially, if I were going to drop you off in the Amazon rainforest and I were going to give you a duffel bag, what would I put in that duffel bag? Well, there are a number of things that we can all think of that would go into that duffel bag. Millennial Samurai, the book, is the duffel bag that I'm leaving to my 22-year-old daughter, my nieces, and my nephews. It's their survival kit. And quite literally, if there were one thing that my daughter were going to leave my house, taking with her, assuming she couldn't get it anywhere else, I would want her to take that book. And if there were only one thing I could leave her, it would be that book. And so I've spent years researching it. What happened to me was in 2012, I had a heart attack. And I had been practicing law for well over 20 years. Now it's been 30 years. But in 2012, when that happened, I was concerned that my daughter was only 16 at the time, and that if I died, I would be leaving her with whatever wealth I had accumulated, but that my knowledge would die with me. And I thought that that was a terrible waste. And I wanted to try to download my knowledge to provide her with that. So I began to write a letter to my daughter. And that letter, because I'm a writer and I like to write, that letter grew and grew. And within months, I had over 100 pages. And I realized that this isn't a letter, this is more of a book. And then I thought, well, hey, that's a great idea. Why don't I just turn it into a book? And why don't I leave it for her and for my nephews and for my nieces? And as a book, it could help other people. And so that was my first book. That was a book called Seize Your Destiny, A Roadmap to Success. And essentially what I had done in that book was I took the knowledge that I had acquired throughout my professional life, and I tried to download it into guidance for young people. And that was, hold on, I'll grab a copy here. That was my first effort at authorship and writing a book, and that was Seize Your Destiny. And that's for a younger reader. She was 16 at the time. And so it's written to speak to a younger audience. And it's essentially everything that I thought was important for them to know based on what I had learned and experienced during my professional life. So that was Seize Your Destiny. And then when I finished Seize Your Destiny, I realized that what I had done, I had succeeded in my goal of downloading my knowledge into this book. But I had been talking about the prior 30 years. I had been talking about my life, the world that I had lived in. And I realized at that point that the world that my daughter was going to live in was a very different world than the world that I grew up in. And so I wanted to know more about that world. And this is an area that I had not looked at before. So I am not a technologist. I am not someone that has immersed myself in the future or the last 30 years. Or the next 30 years during the majority of my life. Instead, it was that 2012 heart attack that created a turning point that caused me to begin writing. And then the completion of that book and the realization that I had not addressed her future and how that was going to evolve that caused me to continue to write and to produce my second effort at writing, which is Millennial Samurai, which is receiving rave reviews. If you go on Amazon, you can look at the book and the reviews that it's receiving. My goal is really to try to get that out to as many people as possible. So I'm giving away a free digital download of the entire book. All 444 pages are available for free. If you'd like to download that, you can go to millennialsamurai.com and you can download the digital version of the book for free. Those who are interested in a hard copy of either of these books can go to Amazon. So when I started looking at the future, beginning really in probably around 2016, when I finished my first book and began looking at the next 30 years was around 2016. And I started immersing myself in what was happening. I started reading voraciously about what was the new technological innovations that we were going to experience and that my daughter would be experiencing, and how was her life likely to change, and what was it that I needed to tell her about that new world that she would be living in. And so that was how I've spent my time from 2016 forward, is both researching and writing that new book, Millennial Samurai. So that, in any case, here's what I saw. I'm going to tell you about what I saw and what my thoughts are on it. So let's see, hold on a second. Okay, change is coming. So first of all, we are living, I believe, in the most extraordinary period in human history. And the reason that I say that, Stephen Hawking, theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking, in 2014, before he died, said that the singularity, the moment in time when machine intelligence would eclipse human intelligence, would be the greatest event in human history. Greater than fire, greater than the wheel, greater than space travel or the internet, greater than anything that man has ever envisioned. And Ray Kurzweil, who's the head of artificial intelligence for Google, when I first began looking at what Ray Kurzweil was saying, he told us that he was originally saying back in 2016 that singularity, that moment in time that Hawking was talking about, would come as early as 2045. Kurzweil has recently adjusted his prediction and is now saying that the singularity could come as early as 2029. That's 9 years away. So the greatest event in human history may come to us in the next decade. In fact, I saw Elon Musk recently make a comment that it could happen in less than 5 years. Now, whether Musk is correct in his 5-year prediction, Kurzweil is correct in his 10-year prediction, or none of them are correct, and it's 20 years before we reach the singularity, or even 30 years before we reach the singularity, that is a debatable point of marginal significance. The real significant fact is that it's coming. The singularity is coming, and that it will change life as we know it dramatically. Kurzweil talks about our neural cortex. By the 2040s, so this is even more remarkable, Kurzweil says that by the 2040s, artificial intelligence will not be our equal. It will be 1 billion times more capable than human intelligence. Now, Bill Gates says that Ray Kurzweil knows more about artificial intelligence than anyone he knows. And Google can pretty much afford to hire just about anybody to be their head of AI, and they've chosen Ray Kurzweil. So, we ought to have some level of confidence in the things that he's saying. And most of his predictions over the past several decades, I've seen information that suggests that he's 70 to 80% accurate in his predictions. So sometime during this time frame, these events are likely to occur. And again, it's no point in quibbling over whether it's going to be 1 billion times more capable than human intelligence, or simply 1 million times more capable than human intelligence, or simply 1,000 times more capable of human intelligence. If your dog were 1,000 times smarter than he is today, who knows? He might be walking you. So the point is that radical change is coming. Radical changes in intelligence. Kurzweil talks about our neural cortex being connected to the cloud. And that today, if I want to know something, I go to my phone, I go to Google, I look it up, and pretty instantaneously I can find the answer. When I was a young man, I would have to get on my bike and go drive to the library to find out these answers, and now they're available on my phone. In 1969, when they were putting men on the moon, it required a room full of computers to put men on the moon. And if you were to go back to that room today, if you were to time travel back 50 years to 1969, and you were to appear with this phone, and you were to say, hey, gentlemen, hey, everyone, this has 100,000 times the computing power that you have in this room. And in 50 years, everyone will have one. These scientists would have looked at you and probably thought that what you were talking about was science fiction. Some of them might have had the vision to believe that it was true, but many would think 100,000 times the computing power in this little device and everyone will have one? I don't know about that. Well, that's exactly what has happened. Someone who was talking about, another futurist was saying that if someone is talking about the future, and it doesn't sound like science fiction, they don't know what they're talking about, because the future will be very much like science fiction. And that's probably always been the case, but perhaps never more so than now. Kurzweil also talks about nanobots in the 2040s pulsing through our bloodstream, curing all of our diseases, is what he's suggesting. He also talks about a hive mentality, that if all of our neural cortexes are connected to the cloud, you'll know everything I know, and I'll know everything you know. And access to information will be instantaneous. I won't have to go to a phone or a device to find the answer to a question. I'll just think of the question, and the answer will come to me instantaneously through the cloud. So this is the world that Kurzweil and Hawking and others like them are predicting. And again, whether that's probably not 5 years away, probably more like 10, 15, 20 years away. When that happens, it's going to create radical change. Now, what kind of change? Well, first of all, McKinsey and Company has said that today, right now, 47% of US jobs are susceptible to automation with existing technology. So today, half of the jobs that are out there can be replaced by technology. And that number is only going to increase. So what is this radical change going to require? So the World Economic Forum is predicting widespread disruption, economic disruption over the next 5 years. Over the next 30 years, industries will change, employment will change, governments will change, social, religious, and political institutions will change. The need for adaptation will therefore be critical. This is a picture of the fire ant. If we look to nature, we find many examples of how nature recognizes its profound interdependence. Fire ants can't swim. They drowned in torrential rains. In order to avoid drowning, they lock their legs and self-assemble into floating rafts. Together, they survive. Alone, they would perish. Humans behave the same way generally in times of crisis. If you look at Katrina, or you look at natural disasters around the world, people come together, human beings come together. And if you're pulling someone out of a torrential flood, you don't stop to ask, are they white, are they black, are they male, are they female, are they Christian, are they Muslim, are they Republican, are they Democrat, You just help them. That's in our nature, and that's how we respond in crisis. And that's how fire ants respond in crisis. The difference is that as human beings, we can plan ahead, and we can anticipate crisis, and we can prepare in advance of crisis. And that's something that I think that we need to do, and something that we're not doing. Today, we already have profound instability, and the technological revolution and automation, for example, and how it will affect employment is going to create even more severe disruption. And so how are we going to deal with that? And how are we going to adapt to that change? There was a study out of Harvard that George Valiant led. It was something like, I think, a 72-year long study that followed the lives of something like 269 freshmen. From freshmen at Harvard through the time they were 80 years old or older. And it tried to determine what was it that led some of these people to lead a happy, healthy, and successful life, and others to lead an unhappy, unhealthy, and less successful life. And they identified 7 factors, the 2 most prominent of which were adaptation and relationships. The ability to adapt to changing circumstances is a key feature in determining whether or not you're going to lead a happy and healthy and successful life. Are you adaptable? And we all are born with a certain level of an ability to adapt, but some of us take stressors and changes more poorly than others. And so there's a range of maladaptation. Mental illness is a form of maladaptation in many respects. People who develop certain conditions develop them because they aren't able to adapt successfully to their circumstances. And so they adapt in another way. They may, create fantasy environments. They may become somewhat delusional. They may become paranoid or schizophrenic, and these are maladaptations. So we need to develop the ability to adapt more successfully. Charles Darwin said, "It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." Success and survival in the 21st century, I believe, will require lifelong learning and constant reskilling, essentially continuous adaptation. And what I'm trying to teach people is not to fear change, but to anticipate it and to be aware of it and to embrace it. The forest, the big picture. Most of us spend our time being focused on the trees. We're trying to pay the bills. We're trying to pay for that new extension to our house that we're trying to put on, or we're trying to take care of our elderly parents, or we're trying to get our kids off to school, or we're trying to keep the lights on. Those are the trees. Those are the daily challenges that we all confront. Not a lot of us have the ability or the luxury to step back and not look at the trees, but instead look at and study and spend time analyzing the forest. And that's what I've been doing since 2016. I've been trying to step back and look at the big picture and trying to analyze the forest. I have the luxury of being able to do that because I've planned my life, fairly successfely. And I'm at a point where I have that luxury, that I can worry less about the trees. I've pretty much taken care of the trees. And so I now have an ability and a desire to focus on the future and to focus on the broader picture. And so that's what I'm spending my time on, and that's what I'm writing about, and that's what I'm trying to understand. And again, I don't pretend to have all the answers. But if I were to ask you what's happening in the back of the room that you're sitting in, you wouldn't really be able to tell me very much about it because you're not looking at it. So it really doesn't matter how smart you are. If you're not looking at something, you're really not going to be able to tell me that much about it. I have been looking for the last 4 or 5 years at what's happening more globally, more in a putting the dots together type of analysis. And I come to this with a background in research and analysis and problem solving. And so I have a bit of a, if you've done something well, Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers talks about developing a high level of proficiency, and he talks about spending 10,000 hours, that if you have a certain amount of raw talent and you spend 10,000 hours on a certain craft or profession, or learning how to play an instrument or throw a basketball or whatever it is that you develop your skills at, that time invested, that practice, that repetition creates a mastery of a certain area. I've spent 30 years solving complex problems, and they're very different problems. They're, when you're a practicing lawyer and people are coming into your office, they're coming in with different problems, different industries, different people, different circumstances, and every problem is new. And most of the problems you may have little or no familiarity with before you begin looking at the problem. So you have to become a quick study, and you have to learn how to learn broadly. And we'll talk about, as we get further, about the difference between a broad learner and a deep learner. I'm a broad learner. I'm not so much a deep learner. Some of you, maybe one or the other. You'll know more as we explore this. But my focus now is on the future, and it's on the forest, on the big picture. One of the things that is going to impede us is ignorance. Justice David Souter of the United States Supreme Court commented that the greatest threat facing America is not Russia or China or anything else. It's civil ignorance. It's that we have a large body of people in this country that are very uneducated, and perhaps their parents were uneducated. Whatever the reasons are, we have a large population that is easily persuadable, easily manipulated, and do not engage in the kind of critical thinking that is going to be required to survive and thrive in the 21st century. So ignorance is a huge problem, and it's one of the obstacles that we're going to have to overcome. My belief is that as a society, we have ignored large segments of our population for generations, perhaps hundreds of years. And that, you know, the philosophy that we've embraced of capitalism and, you know, this kind of Darwinistic philosophy of I'm not my brother's keeper, and, you know, I want to further the theory, or the virtues of personal responsibility, and I want people to, you know, get off their ass and do what they need to do. In a capitalist system, that's worked well for some of us, right? So I've managed to embrace that environment and succeed in it, but others have not. Others have fallen behind, some very significantly behind, and many of those people have had children, and those children are falling even further behind. And so our failure to address that is beginning to catch up with us, right? The riots that you're seeing in the streets are not all about George Floyd. They're about frustration and hopelessness and despair, and people feeling that they don't have a future. They don't feel secure in their future. They don't feel that they are going to have the same life that their parents had. They don't know that they'll be able to buy a home. Many of them are saddled with crushing student debt. We have $1.5 trillion in student debt, more than all credit card debt combined. Student debt exceeds all credit card debt, which is phenomenal. We shouldn't have that kind of a situation where people are, you know, laboring under that crushing debt, and then their purchasing power is declining, and now automation is coming, and they're going to be displaced, and they're not properly trained, and our current education system doesn't allow for the kind of training that's required for what's coming. These are all issues that we're going to need to confront, and sooner than later. And if we continue to ignore them, you're going to see more of what you're seeing today. You're going to see more protests. You're going to see more rioting. You're going to see more destruction and crime. And part of the solution to that is addressing the conditions that exist in this country, that have existed for centuries, and that we have not adequately addressed. Thomas Jefferson said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and what never will be. So the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development provides the most comprehensive international assessment of student learning. In the United States, only 13.5% of young people, of 15-year-olds, actually, if you move this screen, my screen would read 13.5% of 15-year-olds, can distinguish the difference between fact and opinion when trying to complete a reading task, a complex reading task. In the UK, only 11.5%, and the average for all countries is only 9% of 15-year-olds that can distinguish between fact and opinion in a complex reading assignment. So if you give them a story, and part of that story is factual and part of it's opinion, they're unable to make the differentiation, which creates a potential for manipulation and misinformation that can cause this population, this uneducated population, to react in ways that upset the equilibrium of society and create chaos or anarchy. The human brain. The human brain is something that we need to have a greater appreciation for and understanding of in terms of how it's going to influence, how it's influencing us today, and how it will influence us throughout all of this that I'm describing. So, you know, when a 16-year-old is put into a car, we don't put them behind the wheel of a car and entrust them with this tool and 2,000 pounds of metal barreling down the street without training them in how to use this tool, right? But no one really trains us about how our brain works or how to use it. We may not realize that we have the ability, as Jill Bolte Taylor, Harvard neuroanatomist, tells us, that we have the ability to control our thoughts. They might not know about neuroplasticity and how we can actually increase our IQ. I remember taking an IQ test when I was 12. And I didn't, it was a Stanford Binet IQ test, I believe. My sister and her husband wanted me to take it. And my response at the time was, I don't want to take the test when I'm 12 because I'm not as smart as I'm going to be. I'm going to be smarter when I'm older. So let me take the test when I'm older. And their response was, no, it won't matter. You're being judged against other 12-year-olds. And so whatever your IQ is today, your IQ is going to stay the same throughout your life. Neuroanatomists no longer believe that to be true. Neuroanatomists now believe that neuroplasticity allows your brain to evolve over time and that you can actually increase your IQ from a 12-year-old to 20, 30, 40, 60-year-old through learning, through practice, through meditation, through mindfulness, that you can actually change your IQ. Now, to what degree and to what extent is, I'm sure, person to person, subject to the vagaries of the individual. But there are other things about the human brain that we don't know and that we should know. We don't know much about confirmation bias or motivated reasoning or cognitive dissonance. At least the vast majority of the public doesn't understand these concepts. They don't understand that what they perceive to be truth may not be truth at all. It may be, or what they perceive to be reality may not be reality at all. It may simply be their version of reality, their version of truth. So our brains receive 11 million bits of information per second. We've learned more about the human brain over the last 5 years than we have over the last 5,000 years. And we've learned that our brains receive 11 million bits of information, give or take, every second of the day. And yet our conscious brain can only process 15 to 50 bits of information per second, which means that the vast majority of information that's coming into our brain is coming into our brain outside of our conscious awareness, okay? So when you understand that the vast majority of information that enters the human brain enters outside of our conscious awareness, you understand the potential for manipulation and misuse of that information. If you're not consciously aware of some of the information that I'm putting into your brain, then it's very hard for you to protect against it. And yet it can influence the way you think and the way you believe and the way that you receive information. So learning more about the human brain is another part of the puzzle. We confirmation bias. I am much more likely to agree with something that conforms to my pre-existing worldview. So if I don't like Donald Trump and he says something bad, that is going to come right in and be received by my brain as being consistent with my worldview. Yes, of course he would say something bad because he's a bad guy, right? But if he says something good, that may create cognitive dissonance, right? I may look at that differently than if I liked him, right? If I liked him, I would receive that information immediately. But if I don't like him, then my brain will set up roadblocks. It'll set up hurdles. I may require a more trusted and reliable news source for information that tells me something good and for me to believe it. And yet if they're telling me something bad, and that's my existing worldview, then I may accept that information from a dubious news source, where I wouldn't accept positive information about the same person from that same dubious news source. So the way that these mechanisms in our brain and these work to essentially recognize information that sounds familiar to us and that conforms to our existing views and accept that readily, and put a roadblock in front of information that challenges our existing worldviews, is something that people need to know about, because it will make them have a greater understanding of how to receive information and how to keep their own biases in check, and how reality may be different than what their brain is originally telling them, because of the predisposition of the brain to welcome information that mirrors its existing views and reject that which opposes them. So this is all information that I'm trying to share with young people so that they understand how their brain works, and how these concepts work, and how critical thinking requires that they factor in all of this information when they're trying to get to the truth. How tribalism affects it, how groupthink affects it, how all of these things that impact the way we think affect our receipt and processing of information. Barriers to the truth. Alvin Toffler said that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Our brains are not only seekers of truth, they are advocates for that which we already believe. And that advocacy can be a barrier to truth. We sometimes resist the truth. We want validation. We want acceptance. Our egos hate being torn down, even to be rebuilt. Consistent information and inconsistent information with our existing worldview actually travels down different neural pathways. So consistent information comes down a highway, a superhighway that the brain lets it in because it's consistent with what the brain recognizes and already believes. Inconsistent information takes the back road. It's longer, it's more arduous, and there are hurdles that are along that path in order for the brain to receive that information. Tribalism. Tribalism is another important concept for people to be aware of because it's affecting the world that we live in. Every day at the opening of Congress, the United States Senate reads a speech by George Washington, our first president, in which he warns of the perils inherent in extreme partisanship. And today, we are running into that admonition headstrong. America is divided today into two tribes. In fact, researchers have had to go back 160 years to the Civil War to find a time when Americans were more politically divided than they are today. We were not this divided as a nation during the Civil Rights Movement or during the Vietnam War. We have never been as divided as we are today, other than at the Civil War. And that raises some very serious potential threats, because in 1860, there weren't 300 million guns in circulation, and we didn't have social media. So both of these can be an accelerant to conflict. We're in uncharted waters, essentially. And it's a time that I think merits significant concern. In 1961, James Stoner did a groundbreaking study on groupthink at Yale. And essentially, what he concluded was the thought was that groups would form better decisions because the group would reach a consensus and then the consensus view would be the middle of the road view of the group, the most reasoned and rational outgrowth of the group's combined intelligence, and that's the direction that the group would move in. Stoner discovered that a phenomenon called groupthink actually takes hold in some groups, and what happens is that the consensus of the group does not become the direction of the group. That group leaders emerge from within that group, and those group leaders sometimes have more extreme views. And then those extreme views become the views of the group. And that's called groupthink. And so we face the threat of groupthink, whether it's on the liberal side or the conservative side of the spectrum. Both of these groups are susceptible to groupthink, and the more extreme views seem to be coming out of both of these groups today. Echo chambers. We often gravitate towards tribes or towards groups. It's in our DNA. It goes back to when man first was roaming the planet. If we were all in a cave, if everyone in this room, in this virtual room that I'm speaking to today, if we were all back into prehistoric times and we were all in the cave and everybody in the cave is eating meat and I declare myself to be a vegetarian, I might have gotten thrown out of the cave back then, and I might have starved, or I might have, been subject to the elements or killed by wild animals. So I didn't buck the group. I went along with the group. And in echo chambers today, we like to think, again, we want validation. We want acceptance. We want the strength of a group. Some of us feel powerless without a group, or we feel threatened, or we feel vulnerable without a group. And so we align our views to the group to conform and to have that solidarity and that community, which we feel is essential to our survival and which our DNA kind of naturally gravitates us towards. But this is dangerous to the extent that we get into these echo chambers where all we're doing is hearing the same views that we already hold, right? So if I'm a liberal and all my friends are liberal and I don't know any conservatives and I don't talk to any conservatives and all I do is watch MSNBC, I'm hardening my perspectives. I'm not learning, I'm not unlearning, I'm validating. I'm getting the same information that I already believe, and it's comforting. It's reassuring. It's telling me I'm on the right path. I must be thinking the right things. I must have it right because everybody on TV is telling me I have it right, and all my friends are telling me I have it right, so I must have it right. But if you're in an echo chamber, those are false. Those are creating false senses of security. Because you're not watching and you're not listening and you're not hearing what this other group is saying. So what are all the Republicans saying? And what are all the Fox News saying? And what is that line of analysis telling you? Well, if you never look at it, if you never hear it, if you just reject it reflexively, then you're not learning the way you should be learning. We want, in order to learn, you want a helicopter perspective. This is something that I learned in my 30 years of practicing law. When I would have a client come into me, I would listen to what the client would tell me about their case, and then I would ask the client to role play. And I would say, okay, now you're having this fight with John, right? So now if John were here and you were John, what would you be telling me? Right? And I'd want to hear John's perspective. Well, if I'm representing Jane, I don't have the ability to bring John in initially. I've got to have Jane role play, and I've got to have her tell me what John would say. And that may not be a complete story, and she may hold things back. But the idea of the process was to learn as much as I could about, and I would try to get them to role play as well as they could, and express John's position as well as John would, or as forcefully as John would, so that I really understood it. Because at the end of the day, if we were going to go in front of a judge, the judge would listen to both Jane's position and John's position, and they would take that helicopter perspective, and they would try to find the truth through these multiple perspectives and arrive at what they considered the truth, and then make a judgment accordingly. Echo chambers rob you. They rob you of that alternative perspective. The other important thing about understanding alternative perspectives is that, you know, if you come to see someone whose opinion differs from your worldview as a threat, or as someone who can add nothing to your life, then you're missing out on an incredible opportunity. These alternative perspectives are an asset that you need to use to better your understanding of reality. If I'm driving down the road, and my wife is seated next to me in the passenger seat, and I ask her, am I clear on the right for a lane change? I'm asking her because she has a view, she has a perspective that I don't have. And so she can see what's on the right side of my car from a different vantage point than I can see it through my rear view or side view mirror. She's got a different view, a better view of the right-hand side of my car. So I'll ask her, am I clear on the right as I'm changing lanes? Just as an added precaution, just to have that extra viewpoint. These alternative perspectives, if you grew up in a penthouse in Manhattan, how could you possibly have the perspective of a young woman who grew up in war-torn Syria, right? You couldn't possibly have the same perspective that she has. And yet her perspective may have value to you. And so gathering all these unique perspectives is something that you should want to do. It's something that we should all want to do. It's something that I'm trying to teach young people to do. And if you start to understand that alternative perspectives are an asset to you, then it reduces division, because, which I believe is the greatest existential threat facing the planet today, is division, not global warming, division. And global warming is an existential threat in its own right, but it's not going to cripple us or create a civil war over the next 5 years, but division could. And so division is an immediate existential threat, and we need to get past it. And one of the ways you get past it is that you recognize you have to develop a mindset that values the positions of other people as an asset to you. And instead of looking them as a threat, look at them as a resource, okay? And hopefully that mindset will help people and get out of your echo chambers. I don't just watch CNN or MSNBC or Fox News. I watch them all, and I surf between them. And I read everything that I possibly can. And I read from conservative authors, and I read from liberal perspectives. And I'm trying to get information, and I'm not reading for validation. I'm not watching television or reading for validation. I'm not looking for somebody to tell me that I'm right. I don't need that information. I don't need to know that I'm right. If I'm right, I'm going to be fine on my own. What I need is disconfirming information. What I need is to find out where I'm wrong. And so I look for information that challenges my assumptions and challenges my belief systems and challenges my worldview. I look for disconfirming information. Media fuels political polarization. Moral clarity is seductive. It's great to think that, hey, I've got this dialed in. The person I voted for is the right person. The positions that I've taken on gun control or abortion or economic inequality or whatever they may be, they're the right positions. I want that moral clarity. It's amazingly attractive to think that I've got the right answers. It's clean, it's simple, it's clear. when you have these ideologies about liberalism or conservatism. It's like animals. It's like, you know, I've got little animals on my t-shirts and my shorts, and I can match them together, and I don't have to think. I don't have to think for myself. I just follow the Republican Party, or I just follow the Democratic Party. And it's a laziness. It's an intellectual laziness. The alternative, though, to this clarity and this clean, simple, you know, I'll just go the way of my conservative friends, or I'll just go the way of my liberal friends, the alternative to that is ambiguity and uncertainty and the threat of being ostracized by my group or my echo chamber. Because sometimes if you're surrounded by all conservatives and you express a liberal view, it may not go over well. That may be threatening to you. Or threatening to others. And so you may conform your views. Advertisers, tech companies, governments, political parties, they profit from misinformation, disinformation, and distraction. In 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, Yuval Noah Harari says, if a nation is facing external invasion or diabolical subversion, who has time to worry about overcrowded hospitals or polluted rivers, right? It's like the shell game of the guy who has the walnut shells in New York that, you know, you go up to on the sidewalk and he's moving the shells around, right? You know, is Russia the big threat? You know, Russia. Russia is the least of our concerns. If you want to worry about a country, worry about China. Russia is the least of our concerns, okay? And yet we've spent how much time on Russia's disinformation campaign? Yes, Russia is absolutely engaged in a disinformation campaign. The Mueller report taught us that, and we all knew it before the Mueller report. So, but China is hacking into our systems daily, thousands of times a day. We're getting security breaches from China. And China is the dominant economic superpower that is expanding internationally through the One Belt Road Initiative, the Silk Road Initiative. They've built a 2,600-acre archipelago in the South China Sea, 500 miles from their mainland, in disputed international waters, in one of the world's great shipping lanes. That could create a chokehold on traffic out of Asia. They are neck and neck with the United States in technology and AI. They have a computer called the Sunway Tau Light that calculates at 126 petaflops per second, 126 quadrillion calculations per second. They're said to be coming out with a computer this year that is going to calculate at 1 quintillion calculations per second, 1 billion calculations per second. The United States and China are in an arms race, but the arms race is not nuclear weapons. The arms race is artificial intelligence. Vladimir Putin in 2017 said that he who controls artificial intelligence will control the world, have the ability to enslave the globe. And so China and the United States are in a race to develop artificial intelligence. And the first one that does is going to have a commanding presence that the other one may not ever catch up to. Because if you take Kurzweil's theory about artificial intelligence increasing from our equal to 1 billion times our equal over a 20-year period, it's not going to take long once we reach the singularity for that machine to learn on its own and to increase at such a rapid geometric rate that it would be impossible for anyone to catch up. So China and the United States are locked in this race. And they both may be getting nervous about who is going to win that race, because who is going to win that race may have dire consequences for the one who doesn't win. And so we've got that going on. Alternative perspectives, we talked about that and the power of alternative perspectives. But on alternative perspectives, it's important to understand that all beliefs, all these beliefs that we have, we think a certain way about the world, and we think a certain way about society and our jobs, and about politics, and about political parties, and about religions, and about, even, how mankind evolved or got here. Stuart Brand, futurist Stuart Brand, says, in the future, concepts like evolution will be seen as laughable. The Big Bang Theory, Einstein's theory of relativity, gravity, all of these theories are theories. They're not facts. They're not necessarily reality. They're theories. So if all of these great theories that have come to define our existence on the planet, the theory of relativity, gravity, if all of these are not necessarily reality, but instead are simply theories, then think about your own views and how wedded to your own views should you really be, right? How certain can you be that what you think is true is actually true, that what you think is reality is actually reality? In fact, people like Niels Bohr and Heisenberg don't even believe in a fixed reality. Einstein and Hawking believed in a fixed reality, but they called it their religion. Einstein called it his religion because he couldn't prove the existence of a fixed reality. And people like Bohr and Heisenberg think that there is no fixed reality, that if molecules have no fixed state, that there is no guaranteed reality. They can evolve into anything and become anything. And so 10 years from now, humanity will have doubled the amount of our scientific knowledge that has been discovered since the dawn of time. This is what I'm reading, is that the growth in knowledge, like our growth in knowledge of the human brain, is only going to increase dramatically, and even more dramatically, as artificial intelligence comes online and becomes more powerful. We'll have a level of knowledge that makes our current level of knowledge look like we're imbeciles. And so there's a difference also between knowledge and intelligence that needs to be explored. Knowledge is something that you can get by going and Googling something and acquiring the knowledge, or reading a book and acquiring the knowledge. But intelligence is the ability to use that information and the ability to make connections between very different sets of information and disciplines, and find solutions to problems through connecting that information and making sense of it, as opposed to just knowing something. In 1930, an engineering degree was said to have a half-life of 35 years. In 1960, that same degree was said to have a half-life of 10 years. And today, it's said to have a half-life of 5 years, meaning that half of what you would learn in acquiring that degree, so go out and get your engineering degree today, and over the next 5 years, half of what you learned is either going to become untrue or irrelevant. It's not going to be useful to you. So ultimately, what we need to develop is, and especially if we're going to have knowledge at our fingertips, if we're able to just think of a question and have the answer come to us from the cloud instantaneously, then knowledge acquisition is not what we want to be focused on. What we want to be focused on is intelligence development, learning how to think, learning how to take that knowledge and work with it. Harari says people need the ability to make sense of information, to understand the difference between what is important and what is unimportant, and above all, to combine many bits of information from diverse sources into a comprehensive picture of the world. That's intelligence, and that's what we need to be training people to be able to do. is be more intelligent and draw those connections and engage in critical thinking and find answers that are not available today. Google's top 7 skills. Google identified its highest performing employees and what were the skills that were common to these group of high performers, and what did they think were the most important skills for their company. And one of them was being a good coach. Another was communicating and listening well. Another was possessing insights into others' different perspectives. So being able to appreciate and draw from alternative perspectives, having empathy towards others, including coworkers, which helps in gathering information from others, being a good critical thinker, being a good problem solver, and being able to make connections across complex ideas and disciplines. Complex, multidimensional problems require out-of-the-box thinkers. This requires intelligence as opposed to knowledge. People like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are polymaths. They're broad learners as opposed to deep learners. So you might think of Jeff Bezos as someone who created Amazon.com and knows something about building an online bookseller. But he's also doing Blue Horizon, the space exploration company. And he's also the owner of the Washington Post newspaper. And so he has a broad range of interests and a broad range of knowledge. Bill Gates going from Microsoft to building toilets in Africa. Elon Musk going from Tesla to SpaceX to the Boring Company to Solar City. These are broad learners. These are polymaths, and you want to be a broad learner. Broad learners are people that have the ability to learn more quickly because they've been broad learners, and to draw from different areas to solve problems. I'll give you an example of this. So I had practiced, I consider myself a broad learner because over the last 30 years, I've been looking at all these different issues that have come into my office, and I've had to solve all these different problems, that may have ranged from, textile manufacturing to shipbuilding to, carpeting retail. Just a broad spectrum of industries and of people and of personalities and of legal issues. And that learning of all of those different areas made me a broad learner and a quick learner. So, for example, when I was required to argue before the United States Supreme Court, I had never argued before an appellate court in my life. My first appellate court argument was before the United States Supreme Court. And it was on a criminal law issue. And I had never practiced criminal law for a day in my life. So I was not a criminal law attorney, and I was not an appellate court advocate. But I argued before the United States Supreme Court, and I won 9-0. And how did I do that? I had the Attorney General's office create binders on all the areas of law. There were 3 major areas of law that were implicated in my Supreme Court argument. And I had them research these areas of law going back 200 years. One of the areas was Sixth Amendment, right to confrontation. We had to go back to the trial of Sir Walter Raleigh and to Roman times before that, and all the cases that had covered the Sixth Amendment Confrontation Clause. I had to become familiar with, having never looked at the Confrontation Clause, having never had any occasion to be involved in that area of law, or the Supremacy Clause, which was another area, or the Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act of Congress, which was another area. None of these things I had any familiarity with. I had my staff create binders. And I went to Washington, D.C., and I locked myself in a hotel room for 2 weeks with these binders. And I lived with these binders, and I immersed myself with these binders, and I devoured these binders, and I never left the hotel room. And all I did was study these binders. And by the time I walked in to argue before the United States Supreme Court, I felt that I knew more about these areas than probably anyone in the world, except these 9 justices. And I was able to go in and argue my case before the US Supreme Court, before these 9 brilliant jurists, without notes. And because you can't stop and look at your notes, because you only have a half an hour. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on my ass in the first 10 seconds. So there was no time to look at my notes. I had to be fielding questions the entire time from people, many of the people who had written many of these decisions and knew them far more thoroughly than I did. But that ability to do that ability to learn that information quickly, and develop a mastery of that information, came from being a broad learner, came from years and years and years of having to learn new things all the time, okay? When I got involved in real estate, this isn't a one-off example. I had never been involved in real estate. I started buying real estate. One of my very first purchases in real estate, one of the things that I did was, I remembered back in law school, there was a development in San Diego where the city of San Diego had condemned through eminent domain an area, a 1-block city block area, and they had given that land to a real estate developer named Ernie Hahn, and he had built a thing called Horton Plaza. And I remembered being in law school, 30 years ago, and watching the growth of the downtown San Diego area that was all initiated. The catalyst for all of that growth was this eminent domain development, and the city going in and creating a situation where economic development occurred on that one block. And then from that block, development expanded, and a restaurant row was created on 5th Avenue, and then all of a sudden 6th Avenue, 7th Avenue, 8th Avenue, all the way down to 20th Avenue, eventually over a 25-year period developed, right? So I remembered seeing that. It began while I was in law school, and then as I would go back to San Diego and visit, I would see the development, and it stuck with me that this is something that I had seen. So then flash forward in Las Vegas, I'm practicing law in downtown Las Vegas, and I read in the newspaper that the city of Las Vegas has assembled a 61-acre parcel, and they're going to create this development on this 61-acre parcel. They want to put possibly a sports stadium. They want to put all sorts of retail and residential and commercial, and that this is going to be sort of the epicenter of development. And it caused me to remember back in San Diego what I had seen. And so I knew that there was going to be development in Las Vegas around that 61 acres. So what did I do? I started to identify all the pieces of property around that 61 acres, and I created binders. I had a sheet for every single piece of property within a 1 mile square radius of this, what was going to be this epicenter of development. And my thesis was that as that epicenter grew, so too would the 1 mile radius surrounding it. So the question was, what property could I acquire in that radius? And so I started to look at all the different properties. And then I started to eliminate certain properties and say, this one has a going business on it. And I don't want a business. I want raw land. I want as much raw land as I can get. I want the biggest parcel with nothing on it. Well, there wasn't much property that was undeveloped. Almost everything in the area had been developed. So I had to choose between property that was developed with a building or property that had a going business. So I eliminated all the going businesses because I didn't want them. I looked at all the property that just had a building on it. And then I looked for the least viable building. I wanted a tear down because I really wanted raw land. I didn't want to pay for a building that I didn't want. My goal was to get raw land. So if they all had buildings, I wanted the tear down building because I would be able to buy the land for cheaper. And ultimately I bought this piece of property for $2.5 million. And within 4 months, I had it in escrow for $10 million. I closed escrow 1 year later for $10 million, made $7.5 million. I was not a real estate investor. I had no familiarity with real estate investing. I knew nothing about real estate investing, but I learned. I taught myself, and I approached it very systematically, and I learned it quickly. And I now believe that I can go into pretty much any area and I can learn what I don't know. I just have to apply myself. I have to focus, and I have to learn, and I have to read, and I have to devour information, and I have to talk to people, and I have to solicit alternative perspectives and get all the perspectives that I possibly can and develop a helicopter perspective of what it is that I'm looking at to fully understand it. And this is how I approach critical thinking. And this is what I'm trying to teach people to do, and especially teach young people. Let's see, hold on. So learning itself is a skill. When you exercise that skill across multiple domains, you become specialized as a learner, and you learn faster. This is a skill that someone who goes deep doesn't necessarily have. They may not be a quick learner. It's that need to learn a lot of different things over and over, different things constantly changing time and time again, and doing it in a way that's economical for a client that causes you to become a quick, broad learner. So, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've developed some ability in that area. Isaac Asimov wrote 500 books and 90,000 letters. Isaac Asimov is a fascinating story. His father was very poor, and what his father was able to give him was a library card. So his father gave him a library card and no direction. The father wasn't educated. He wasn't capable of giving him any direction. So he just gave him a library card. And Isaac Asimov went in, and because he had no direction and nobody telling him what he needed to learn or what he should focus on, he learned everything. He read everything. He just, what's his name? Warren Buffett has said that he read every single book in the Omaha, Nebraska library on finance. He read them all, right? This is how people acquire information. They devour information, and this is how they acquire knowledge. So ultimately, Isaac Asimov became a prolific writer and learner because of a lack of direction. And the only direction his father had to give him was, here's a library card, go to the library, and there's some great stuff in there that you need to, become familiar with. And that's exactly what he did. Finding the truth. If you want to find the truth, you need to focus on the truth. Truth needs to be your objective. Don't look for confirmation. Look for the truth. Want the truth. Even if it is assaulting to your ego or your worldview, or doesn't give you the validation that you might otherwise want, or threatens your relationships, or whatever it does. If you are a seeker of truth, then truth will be your priority and it will be your focus. And I'm a seeker of truth. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I want. I don't need validation. I don't need you to agree with me. I don't care if you agree with me. I'm confident enough in my own belief system that I have an open mind. I want to hear things. I want to hear what you have to say, but I don't need to convince you of anything. I'm not trying to change your views on life. I'm just telling you what I think and what I'm learning, and you can choose to accept it or disregard it at your leisure. An open mind, I believe, is essential to learning. Frank Zappa had a great quote: "A mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it isn't open." And when you think about the speed at which technology will change the world that we're living in, I analogize it to jumping out of an airplane with a parachute on your back. So you're going to be moving at this breakneck speed over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And you've got this parachute. It's called your brain. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work if it isn't open. So if you don't have an open mind, I believe you're going to have a very difficult time of things. But if you have an open mind and you're willing to receive new information, then that's your parachute. Your mind is like both a parachute and a sword. It's a double-edged sword because of the risk of manipulation, but it's a sword that can help you throughout your life. You take it wherever you go. It's your weapon, it's your tool, and you need to constantly sharpen it. Abraham Lincoln once said, if I had 5 hours to chop down a cherry tree or chop down a tree, I would use 4 hours sharpening the axe and 1 hour chopping. Well, the same is true with your brain. You need to sharpen your sword. You need to improve your mind. Now, perhaps not with the Mensa group as much because you've already got great minds, but speaking to the average crowd, this is what they need to do. They need to improve their mind. They need to try to increase their IQ. They need to sharpen their sword. They need to embrace alternative perspectives. They need to open their mind. They need to engage in critical thinking. And they need to look at alternative points of view, not as a threat, but as an asset. Scientists call this integrative complexity, the willingness to accept multiple perspectives, hold them in your head, and then integrate them into a bigger, more coherent picture. That's true intelligence, okay? It's the prolific learner's true advantage. Collaboration. Collaboration ties into everything that we've been talking about and is critical for success going forward. Collaboration is now the norm in scientific research. In 1920, most scientific papers were sole authorships. In the 1950s, co-authorship became the norm. Today, the average scientific paper has 8 to 39 authors. That wasn't true 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, but it is true today. The average scientific paper today has 8 to 39 authors. The high value work today is being done in teams. So you have to be able to work with teams. In the near future, knowledge of facts will become less important. The most sought after skills will be the ability to work with others, the things that machines can't do. Communicate ideas effectively, collaborate with others, and lead. So people, in order to lead, you have to be adept at collaboration. You have to have an open mind. You have to embrace alternative perspectives, and you have to be able to work with others. Empathy has been called the greatest skill of the 21st century. Breakthrough knowledge. What we're looking for is breakthrough knowledge. When you're studying, when you're reading, when you're consuming information, I don't, one of my failings is I don't read fiction. I don't read just for amusement or entertainment. I read to learn. And, maybe that makes me more boring, or maybe that makes me, less multidimensional than I would otherwise be. But I don't feel that I have the time to read for, romance novels or those types of things. I'm not reading to validate my existing beliefs. I'm looking for breakthrough knowledge. I'm looking for things that I didn't know before I read. So today I have a body of information. I'm aware of certain things, but there are many things. As I said in the very beginning, the man who thinks he knows everything knows nothing at all. The only thing I'm certain is there is a great deal I do not know. It's those things that I do not know. That's what I'm reading for. I'm looking for them. I'm looking for more information that I don't currently possess. But anyway, that's my path. That's my path to learning. Right now, somewhere in the world is a paragraph, a sentence, a book that could change your life forever if you read it. This is breakthrough knowledge. Finding breakthrough knowledge in an era of information overload is one of the most important skills that we can develop. Breakthrough knowledge challenges our fundamental beliefs. It's exponentially more valuable than confirming evidence, okay? Science makes its progress through disconfirming information and through breakthrough knowledge. And so this is what I'm searching for, and this is what I believe that I've put into this book is breakthrough knowledge. Half the information in this book I did not know before I wrote the book. So chances are, some portion, a good portion of this book, perhaps half as much, half the book, will be information that you do not know, that you will learn and that will be new to you, and that will enrich you. And so that's breakthrough knowledge. I wanted to provide as much breakthrough knowledge in the book. So in my reading, whenever I found something that I thought, wow, this is amazing, I didn't know this, I'm glad I now know it, other people should know it, those are the types of things that I put into the book. Science grows by what is proven wrong, not by what's proven right. People who learn to access breakthrough knowledge quickly in a sea of distraction will have a huge advantage over other people. How do we find breakthrough knowledge in a sea of distraction? We avoid echo chambers, we seek out alternative perspectives, and we open our mind. Belief. In 2014, Oprah Winfrey was interviewed at Stanford University, and she was asked by a Stanford graduate student, what did you learn from the failures of your philanthropic investments in Africa? So Oprah Winfrey had opened up a girls' school, and she'd opened up a library, and neither were well attended. And so they were consequently failures compared to what she had hoped for. And she was asked what she had learned from that experience. And she said, I learned that in order to succeed in life, you first have to believe in yourself. If you don't have a sense of hopefulness and a sense of aspiration, if you don't believe that greater things are possible for you or for the world or just generally, then you're not going to understand the significance of going to school or the significance of a book in a library. To someone who lacks a sense of hopefulness and a sense of aspiration, a book may be nothing more than a log of firewood to light the family fire, right? If they don't understand the power of that book, then they're not going to read it. If they don't understand the power of that education, then they're not going to attend. And if they don't believe that their fate can change, if they believe that they are destined to a life of carrying buckets of water, from the river, and that they're never going to amount to anything else, then that's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we have large segments of society in America and around the world where we have what I call tinderboxes of hopelessness and despair and a lack of belief in upward mobility. For many of these people, there is no American dream. There's only an American nightmare. And for those people, then, the lure, the siren song of communism or socialism or Marxism can be more and more attractive because they don't believe that they are capable of more. I believe that one of the things that have stopped Marxism from taking hold in the United States is the American dream, is the fact that people believed that they could have something better, that they could have a better life. And I believe that that American dream is less visible and less real and less tangible to millions of people today. And that is the cause for much of the disruption that we're seeing, and that it's being accelerated and aggravated and amplified by our phones, by technology. The cell phone is like the water on the floor of the impending tsunami. It's the first wave of the technological revolution. It's democratized access to media. It's allowed all of us to look into those neighborhoods and those homes and those environments and those people that we never saw before. And now we're seeing. And it's allowed us to see them burning police stations and protesting en masse during a pandemic and voicing their frustration. And the bottom line is that if we don't install this sense of belief and this sense of hopefulness and this sense of aspiration in these tinderboxes of discontent, then this same phone can be used by Russia or by China to speak directly to these disenfranchised souls and can agitate them and can cause them to riot and can cause them to be more dissatisfied and more angry and more hopeless. And you know, you don't need cruise missile launchers or battleships or destroyers to take over America. You can do it from within. You can do it from within by causing our own population to revolt. And with all these tinder boxes of discontent that are spread all over the country, and with a technological tsunami of automation and advances in technology that will create massive unemployment, 3 million truck drivers, #1 job for an American male, gone in 5 years, 10 years at the most. Uber drivers, 3.9 million today, 5 million tomorrow, 0 5 years from now because they'll have driverless vehicles. Clerical workers, #1 job for an American female, gone in 5 to 10 years. You know, today, Amazon workers are sorting products and are paid, you know, by the hour with bonus structures that are built in for the more quick and error-free they can sort packaging. Up until about a month ago, there was no robot that had the dexterity to be able to sort 10,000 SKUs as quickly and as error-free as a human. Last month, a company called Convariant developed a robot that can now sort 10,000 SKUs at a speed that would put an Amazon employee way into the bonus category, and that is done with 99% accuracy. So, you know, how long will Amazon be employing package sorters? I would expect that these major warehouses that they are building are going to be built for robots. They're going to be built for, you know, having this all automated. Adidas has developed a company called the Speed Factory, where they used to ship raw materials to Asia. Low-cost labor would assemble the tennis shoes and then would ship them back to Europe for sale in Europe and North America. There was this added labor cost. There was this added logistics cost, this added shipping cost. Today, the Speed Factory operates in Europe and makes Adidas tennis shoes without human labor or very little human labor. In Fremont, California, the Tesla factory takes a sheet of metal and creates an automobile with 160 robots and very little human involvement required. So we're going to see more and more of this. And as this happens, you have 8 million franchise workers, fast food franchise workers, that likely will be out of work in 10 years. So, you know, whether this is going to happen over the next 5, 10, or 15 years is somewhat of a moot point. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen more quickly than any of us realize. And it's going to create significant disruption. So anyway, that's basically it. You could point your phone maybe at that. You might, I don't know if it'll work on this screen, but that is a QR code that will connect you with all of my contact information. So if you wanted to reach out to me, you'd be able to reach me through that. If you point your phone, your camera at that, it should show up a prompt on your screen, and then you can click on that and it'll download my contact information into your contacts. Or you can reach me. My email is gjchanos, GJCHANOS @gmail.com. gjchanos@gmail.com. Again, you can go download your free copy of Millennial Samurai at millennialsamurai.com. And I'm also building a personal empowerment platform called Limitless. And you can go to limitlessthinking.com and you can check that out. We'll be hosting webinars. We'll be hosting Zoom conferences where I will gather people that I would like to talk to, and I'll interview them through limitlessthinking.com. So you can join that as well. My whole mission in life at this point, I'm 62 years old. This portion of my life is dedicated toward empowering others. And that's what I want to be part of my legacy. And that's what I hope will give greater meaning to my life. And so that's what I'm doing today. I'm writing and I'm speaking and I'm talking about issues that matter. And I'm trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but this is what I've seen so far. And I hope it's been helpful to you.
Phenomenal. George, thank you so much. That was fantastic. At this point, could you stop sharing your screen so we can see everybody?
Yeah, let me see
Just
how I
hit that
do
on the top. There should be an option to stop.
Okay. Uh,
Very top of your screen.
no, I don't want that. Let's see.
I can do it for you.
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
You got it?
Hey, wow. That was phenomenal. Phenomenal. We do have some time for question and answer, and I'd like to start by looking at the chat panel. There were some questions that came up during the
Sure.
presentation, so let's start there.
Before you get started, Cindy, thank you so much for setting this up. George, thank you so much for a very interesting presentation. It's my birthday. I got here after dinner, and now I have to run out again.
Well, thank you.
You so much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Scott. Scott's our local president, or
Yeah, I had to.
secretary, whatever they call it.
Oh, and just one last thing to all of you. If
I
you've
learned
enjoyed-
something, so I'm good.
To all of you that are connected through Mensa, if you think there are other groups that would like to hear this, please share it with them or let them know, because I'd like to speak, I'd like to get the word out. So if you know other groups that you think would enjoy this presentation, please let them know.
And I will post this recording, and I'm continuing to record during the question and answer, so we can include that as well.
Okay.
We'll be posting that on our website as well as our personal. I guess you're giving us permission to share on our own personal social media.
Absolutely. And if you send me a link, I'll post it on my social media as well.
You got it. You got it. Okay. All right. Let's start with the questions that are in the chat panel. What metrics does Kurzweil use to determine machine intelligence surpassing human intelligence?
You know, I don't know. I'm not a deep learner on AI, so I'm not an expert in AI. I'm just telling you what I'm reading. Kurzweil is being quoted as saying.
Okay.
I don't have the expertise to dig deeper and answer that question.
Okay.
Cindy, if I may, that was my question. The reason I asked about what metrics, I wasn't looking for a specific, the rubric or whatever scale or whatnot, but the point being, a monkey, I know we've all heard this metaphor before, but a monkey will always be able to climb a tree 1,000 times better than a fish will. And it's not necessarily a fair intelligence test. And in 10 years, a monkey may be able to climb a tree 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000 times or 1,000,000,000,000 times better than a fish. When you say that AI will surpass human intelligence, is that the monkey versus fish? Is it pessimistic or is it optimistic? When you say that the AI intelligence will surpass human intelligence, are you, to boil it down to one question, are you optimistic or pessimistic about that singularity?
I'm optimistic, but I'm a natural optimist because I see no percentage or no upside in being pessimistic. So now when I say that I'm optimistic, it doesn't mean that I'm oblivious or unaware of the dangers. It just means that I choose not to be frightened because I see no upside in being frightened. So I can look at the risk. I mean, Hawking said that it'll be the greatest event in human history. He also said that it could spell the end of the human race. Elon Musk said that it's potentially more dangerous than nuclear weapons. So I am aware of the risks. And although I am concerned about the risks, I am not fearful or pessimistic. I choose to be optimistic. I choose to instead look at those admonitions of Hawking and Musk and say, okay, so now we know there's a danger as well. Let's address that danger. Let's try to, moderate the way that we approach this in a way that protects us from the danger to the greatest extent possible. I don't think that you're going to be able to put a moratorium on artificial intelligence development because I think it would be circumvented by wealthy individuals that decide to, pursue it just like someone might pursue cloning or might pursue, all sorts of genomic manipulation or DNA manipulation outside of conventions and outside of, medical ethics. People may do things without a societal green light. So I think artificial intelligence and the singularity are coming, whether we want them or not, they are coming. I think we need to be aware of it. I think we need to be aware of the upside and the downside. And I think we need to try to leverage the upside and mitigate the downside.
What is specifically, definitively, what would be the downside of AI? I mean, obviously, faster manufacturing, et cetera. There's a lot of upsides to AI. What would be the downside other than job loss?
Well, the downside, I mean, the ultimate downside is that, if you have an intelligence, if machine intelligence is 1 billion times greater than human intelligence, that is, I believe, far greater than the difference between your intelligence and your dog's intelligence. And so the machine might come to look at humans like we look at pets or like we look at animals. Like why do we have them? What good are they? They just eating shit, I mean,
the way the Homo sapiens saw the Neanderthal during evolution.
Yeah. And so I think that's the real risk. Or them, somehow turning against us. Or I mean, DARPA has created a robot that eats organic material, right? That eats like trees and leaves and generates energy. Generates energy from eating, foliage. And so, might there be a robot that generates energy from, who knows what they could eat? The bottom line is,
I don't mean to interrupt you, and we could go on and on about this, but I think Thomas has a question.
Yeah.
It's a follow-up.
Monopolize your time.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to.
It's sort of a follow-up on that particular line of thinking is that in Mensa, we discuss types of intelligence all the time because the admission to Mensa requires a test of a very specific type of intelligence, to the IQ. But when you talk about machine intelligence, you may be speaking of a different type of, in fact, you must be talking about a different type of intelligence than human intelligence. I suspect you're not talking about machine intelligence reaching sentience.
No, I think that at some point, machine intelligence could reach sentience. I don't assume any limitations to the advances in technology. I think that if you we are limited, however intelligent you may be, or I may be, or any member of Mensa may be, or any human being on the planet may be. We are limited by our range of intelligence, right? So let's say Stephen Hawking and Albert Einstein are at the top of that range. The fact that they are limited in what they can conceive of, if there is an artificial intelligence that Kurzweil describes, which is 1 billion times, or even 1,000 times, or even double what Albert Einstein's intelligence level is, then I don't know that we can even fathom or comprehend what's possible. So, yeah, I would put no limits on it.
To that effect, Stephen Hawking just 6,000 or 7,000 years ago, or sorry, maybe 10 or 20,000 years ago, would have created the wheel. And today you can create an AI that could create a wheel. So when you expand the timeline to not 5 or 10, not 1 lifetime, 2 lifetimes, maybe 10 or 20 lifetimes, at some point AI will get to where sentience is irrelevant. the intelligence of an AI will simulate so profoundly intelligence that humans won't be able to keep up. And I think if I don't want to assume, but George, I believe that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, I mean, essentially.
And according to Kurzweil, sorry, I don't have a great memory, but I believe his name is Kurzweil, is saying that singularity, that point will approach in
2029.
2039, 2029?
9 years away.
So in less than a decade, we will approach AI intelligence.
It's like Big Blue, Kasparov was the world's greatest chess player, and then Big Blue beat Kasparov, right? And in order to train Big Blue, they spent a year feeding Big Blue information, right? And then they put together these teams. I believe they're called Centaurs. Where they were a team where they took a chess master and they took a computer like Big Blue, and they played together. And that was sort of the height of chess playing, was these Centaur combinations of a Big Blue and a master playing against any other machine or any other individual. And then through AI, they developed a program, an AI program, where the machine would teach itself, this AI machine would teach itself chess. So it wasn't a bunch of chess masters feeding in information for over a year. It was leaving the machine itself to learn chess. And that machine, in 4 hours, learned enough to beat the sentient, the Centaur.
AI learns by repeating patterns. It's very simple. It can't go out and make a life for itself, but it can do one thing over and over and over again and learn from that. I don't think AI is going to take over, because humans make AI. Humans do the programming. Humans build the neural masses, and it's all coming out of people who do this. I was at Carnegie Mellon as a physics scholar when the Robotic Institute started. I've been kind of focusing on AI ever since, and they haven't gotten as far as you are predicting yet. And I don't think it's going to take over. Unless somebody sinister, a group of very sinister people get hold of it, and that could happen. But it is a collaborative effort.
It's true, Abby, but to that human, a human invented TNT, but no one human could move a mountain.
Well, so there are people that debate these issues, right? And for example, when Elon Musk said that AI could be more dangerous than nuclear weapons, in response to that, Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos took the position that they don't think that the dangers are what Elon Musk thinks. So Zuckerberg said something to the effect of, he may be overestimating the dangers, or, I don't agree with the dangers. And to which Elon Musk responded by saying that Mark's knowledge of AI is limited. In other words, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So it really depends on who you believe, right? And I guess my feeling on this is that Google is one of the largest and wealthiest conglomerates on the planet, and they can hire anybody to lead their AI department, and they hired Kurzweil. And according to Bill Gates, he's the most knowledgeable person in this area that Gates knows. So I'm relying on what I'm hearing from Kurzweil on this, and I believe that he's been 70 to 80% accurate in his predictions. And whether or not he's right about this happening in 9 years, as I've explained throughout the presentation, is really not the issue. The issue is it going to happen? And you know, is it going to happen in 10 years, or is it going to take 20 or 30 or 40 or 50? And I believe it is going to happen. There's also people like Aubrey de Grey of the SENS Research Foundation, who's also said something that's incredibly provocative. Aubrey de Grey has said that the first person who will live to 1,000 because of advances in genomics is alive today, meaning that over the next 100 years, a child born today will experience longevity velocity and will increase his lifespan from 100 years to as much as 1,000 years. So, what's that?
I said poor baby.
Poor baby. Yeah.
I tend
George,
to agree that we will eventually, you know, they will obviously know more than we do. And I, I hope that we don't become obsolete. But if it comes to that, I just try to picture what our role will be on the earth.
Well, I think that there will be a number of roles. You know, if as long as there are human beings, there will be a requirement for human beings to comfort other human beings, to lead other human beings, to teach and coordinate and collaborate with other human beings. So all the things that are uniquely human that machines can't do, those are the things that ultimately we will evolve into. I mean, why do you think they're talking about a universal basic income? Why do you think guys like Andrew Yang and Elon Musk are talking about a universal basic income? Because human beings will be in large numbers unemployed.
Right.
Right, we'll be unemployable and we'll have to just have a sort of welfare check.
Yeah.
Sort.
Yeah.
They're
George,
doing it now.
George, I would like to.
$600 a month.
I'd like to say thank you for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
What you've said has resonated with me, perhaps in different ways from other people. I don't have a technical background like Dan Tobias and some of the others here. I do have the legal background similar to yours. I went on the bench, you went on to become AG, but for the last 20 years, I have been a mediator, which is something that did not exist when I was in law school. I've got about 6 years on you, so at that time, there was a class called ADR, Alternate Dispute Resolution, that no one took because no one understood it and had any idea that it was worth anything. It was a fluff class. And now I have made a very good living for quite some time. Also, like you, I have written things to go to my children. I have not published them because I haven't finished them yet. But I have had some people tell me that I ought to have them published as well as giving them to my kids. And like you, I have spent a good portion of my adult life in real estate as well, investing in real estate. So a lot of the things you said really resonated. I see the pace of change accelerating. And at some point, we are not going to be able to keep up. So thank you for outlining that for us. I need to head on to another engagement, but thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me and spending the time.
I just want to make one other point. I'm doing a paper on AI right now, and I came across some articles like algorithms have gone rogue, and there's a lot of bias in AI, even in recognizing faces. You can find the wrong person to be charged as a criminal just because the facial recognition didn't work, that kind of thing. So it's been kind of interesting to find out that there's a plus and a minus. Thank you for your time. It's really, really good, really excellent.
Thank you.
And I think you may have talked me into watching that other station.
Oh, good. Good for you. Good for you.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm thinking if AI does become sentient, then they will probably have their own society, and it will exclude us, but we will have our own society. And like pets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Hopefully they'll let us live in the wild.
Well, hopefully we'll train them and raise them properly. You know, it's like sort of raising kids, and do they respect their elders and you know, practice you know, Confucius teachings of respect for their elders, or do they disregard us? We'll see. We'll see whether how our own young people behave towards the elderly, and then how machines behave towards all of us.
Good point. Buddhists have a very high regard for other animals. So
Yes.
hopefully we will have Buddhist AI.
Hopefully it's Buddhists that are programming them.
Hopefully.
I'll tell you, I've got a 1-year-old, and he's going to respect his elders.
Okay, good.
Good for you. I hope so.
Put you
I
in
do
charge,
too.
Richard.
Okay, are there any other questions?
I do have one more question, if that's all right.
All right, last question.
It's in respect to the where 40 years ago you had to get on your bicycle and go to the library, and then 20 years ago, 2000, you can just log on to Google, and then going into the future, you'll be at some point, again, timeline irrelevant, at some point, information will be sent directly to the brain. I am thinking that it's similar. I wrote this down. It's similar to the thought that universal access to information, ergo widespread literacy and freedom of the press, would create a universal increase in intelligence and defer tyranny. So people 100 years ago, widespread literacy wasn't 70% literacy wasn't achieved until 1920. And again, I don't know these off the top of my head. I looked them up while you were talking earlier. But widespread literacy wasn't achieved until 1920s, and it was one of the main arguments back in 1776 for the First Amendment. According to William Blackstone, the liberty of the press is indeed essential to the nature of a free state.
Yeah.
So this access to information, all is essential to a free state, an increased intelligence among the populace, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I myself, as a 32-year-old, I had to think about that one, but as a 32-year-old, I'm noticing that I personally, Richard Day, am getting information from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Imgur. I can keep going. I'll run out of fingers pretty quickly.
Another data
point of information directly to the brain. Who is going to be providing that information? What bias will that information be have? Will it be that directly from Imgur? Will it be directly from CNN, BBC, Fox, et cetera, et cetera? And there's no, I'm a little pessimistic about the future of information going directly to the brain, because that will heavily influence voters on whoever is providing that information, their bias. Is it going to be a liberal bias, a conservative bias? What can we do? I feel like my son, my 1-year-old, is going to have that direct information, that information faster than I will ever conceive. What can I do to teach him to ignore the bias?
Okay, so great question. And essentially, we're going to have more and more information that's available to us. And ultimately, what you want to train your son, what we all want to train our children to do, and what we want to do is we want to become critical thinkers, right? So we want to be able to discern the difference between fact and opinion. We want to be able to discern the difference between truth and falsehood. And so no matter what is being shown to us, if we have a critical mind, we will evaluate that information with a degree of skepticism and with an inquisitive and curious mind. So you want to train, your children to be inquisitive, to be curious, to understand the nature of their brain and understand that it's a double-edged sword, understand their susceptibility and their malleability to misinformation, right? So once they're forewarned, they're somewhat forearmed, right, to guard against these things. And then also, I think we'll have diverse sources of information. So understand and get them into the habit of watching alternative perspectives and seeking out alternative perspectives and having that open mind, because no matter what the information sources are in the future, as long as there is a diversity of information sources, as long as there's a diversity, then you're going to get alternative perspectives, right? Not everybody's going to be saying the same thing or talking the party line, unless we become some kind of a totalitarian, planet where it's all just one source of information being fed to us. But absent that, if you have all these divergent sources of information because of the internet, you're going to want to, develop the practice and the habit of seeking out all this divergent information and then trying to take it in and make sense of it yourself and critically examine it to arrive at what you believe to be reality or the truth. So, you should definitely download Millennial Samurai and read it to your son. I've got people that are starting to read it to their kids already before their kids can read. So
the first book I'm reading him is My Dad is Awesome.
Yeah, that's a good
one.
one.
I'm reading to him right now.
That's a good one.
But so just to clarify, your optimism is coming from as easy as it is to speak the totalitarian, the single party, the single, etc. It's exactly as easy for the information of the delineated information, the other perspectives.
I believe we're at a tipping point. I believe that we can either, that technology creates an opportunity for the second enlightenment, right? So the original enlightenment brought about by the Gutenberg press and literary salons and the beginning of pamphlets and brochures that were circulated among the public, and people began to learn and have access to information. Information no longer was the province of the monarchies or the church, and the mass public started getting information. That was that period in time of Kant and Rousseau, and this was the Enlightenment, the first Enlightenment. I believe that we are at a tipping point where technology can usher in a new second Enlightenment, and that we can go on to have a glorious future, a wonderful, incredible future. But I believe that tipping point also suggests that we could tip into dystopia and that we could go in a very bad direction, right? And so we need to make that choice. And as a society, we need to make that choice. And so, as we look at all these issues that we're confronted with, do you allow free speech to continue? Do you, this is a challenge. Free speech is an area that is come under increasing strife as of late. Some people, you go to college campuses, they do not allow or invite conservative speakers. I think that's a mistake. I think that that's exactly what a university should be. A university should be a place where you have, the greatest minds in liberal philosophy and the greatest minds in conservative philosophy and you bring them all together and you let them all speak and you listen to all of them. And that's how you create enlightenment. Not by limiting access to information, having one mantra that we all follow.
But then who regulates the people that are manipulating the confirmational bias?
Well, I don't know that you're going to be able to regulate them, because as long as the very freedoms that we enjoy create the susceptibility that we fear. So free speech allows the Nazi to speak, and that's a threat. And it allows the people with the white supremacists to speak, and that's a threat. But so you have to accept that threat to have a broader array of information. Our phones, and having access to information coming directly into our phones without a gatekeeper, where anybody can post things that can come to me. That's a freedom. It's a luxury. It can lead to enlightenment, but it also is that Achilles heel that misinformation can travel through. That same phone that can liberate you can enslave you. And so we just need to be, the only thing that I think we can do is be aware of all of these issues, and understand that more information is better. The cure to false and dangerous speech is not less speech. It never has been. It has always been more speech. More speech exposes the fallacy and the wrongheadedness of bad ideas. More speech alerts you to alternative perspectives that may give you insight into reality that you wouldn't otherwise have. So I believe we need to hang on to our reverence for free speech. And I think we just need to guard against misinformation and be better at critical thinking.
If I might, I feel like Julius Caesar was an excellent public speaker, and solely on his ability to speak became a dictator in his time.
Yes.
And that there are, by definition, 50% of the human population has a below average intelligence. And you only need, in a democratic society, you only need slightly more than 50% consent to
Yes.
do whatever you want.
Yes.
And
Let me interrupt real quick. George, are you open to Richard calling you and talking further?
Sure.
Because I think it's become a Richard and George conversation.
Yeah. Richard can send me an email.
It is 8 o'clock at night, and I apologize to everyone.
And I want to make sure, does anybody else have a question they'd like to ask George?
I'll just say I'm glad you support free speech. That's been a big thing of mine. I mean, I saw if you have read some of my recent columns in the newsletter, I've been decrying cancel culture, which can come from both the left and the right, but these days largely the leftist. Although, I mean, okay, the Trump crowd isn't very good on that either, but leftists have been like very big on calling people bigots for not agreeing with every bit of their ideology, and
I think that's very dangerous. I think that's very dangerous, Daniel. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm very much against cancel culture.
Oh, that's good.
I have one. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thinking about the idea that the machine intelligence is going to become, however, let's just say 1,000 times more than human intelligence, wouldn't free speech become irrelevant, because the intelligence would determine what is true when they feed us the information? Where does free speech come from at that point?
Well, that'll be interesting. I guess that makes a certain number of assumptions. Like, for example, that let's say there are multiple machines, right? And you get a different reading from different machines, right? So let's say Google has an AI machine that says that it's going to rain tomorrow, and Facebook has an AI machine that says that it's not. even if they're 1,000 times more intelligent, there could be variables that you know, could change that equation.
One would presume that they would coordinate on those and
you would think
figure out which variables made sense, which ones worked, and come to a consensus among them, especially if they're 1,000 times more intelligent and have no emotional attachment to a particular result.
You would think. You would think. I just don't know. I don't. You know, it's sort of like we're imagining something that has never existed and is so far beyond us that it's hard to really know how that will affect free speech, for example. But it's fairly certain that it's going to affect all of these types of issues. It's going to affect industries, governments, religions, the Constitution, you know, what rights we have and don't have. I think all of that is going to be in flux over the next, you know, 50 years. And I don't think that any of us are really in a position to predict how that's going to shake out. All we can say is that it could shake out in a very positive way, or it could shake out in a very negative way, or anything in between. And so, you know, simply being aware of that is something that as we move forward, we start to calibrate and we start to make adjustments if we see things moving, you know, for example, Facebook and Google had their AI machines were talking to each other in a language that they didn't understand. So the human beings did not understand the language that the machines, the AI machines, were talking to each other in. Facebook shut down the machines because it was concerned about the risk of not knowing what they were saying to each other. They had developed their own language to communicate with each other. Google experienced, from what I've read, Google experienced the same phenomenon where their machines were talking to each other in a language that they didn't understand, and they did not shut them down. Now, Google has recently announced that they achieved what they're calling quantum supremacy, which is very fascinating. They've indicated that they have solved a math problem that they believe would require the world's greatest supercomputer 10,000 years to solve this math problem. Google claims to have achieved what they call quantum supremacy because their machine solved that same math problem in 200 seconds. So you know, where this is all going and how far along they are, I don't think we're really privy to all that information. I'm just gathering the information that's out there that I'm reading. But there's a lot more going on at Alphabet and Google that is not being published, that I don't know anything about, that you don't know anything about, that Ray Kurzweil may know about what's going on at Google, but he may not know about what they're doing in China, or he may not know about what they're doing at Facebook. And so there are the pace at which this is moving. You know, one of the things that I'm concerned about is that society needs to weigh in on what's happening and where we want this to go. And it's happening at such a breakneck speed, and none of us are being brought in on the discussion. What's happening at Google is happening at Google, and what's happening in China is happening in China, and nobody's, you know, weighing in terms of the general public on what we think ought to be happening here, right? And these are things that should be as part of the public discussion, I believe. You know, I don't know why Bill Gates says, I don't know why more people aren't talking about this. And my response is, more people should be talking about this. I don't know why more people aren't talking about this either.
I mentioned in the chat the GPT-3. That's an independent project. I don't think it's connected with Google or any of the big companies. They don't have the big money. What are you waving about? Oh. Yeah, it doesn't even have the big resources like of a Google behind it, but it's gotten to where it can write essay. You could tell it to write an essay in the style of some particular author on some particular subject, and it'll actually do it, and it'll look like a human wrote. Now, unlike what one of you was saying, that it's not necessarily true. You could tell it to write an essay making a case for some philosophical position or whatever. That doesn't prove it's true. It just proves that what it's actually apparently what its logic is actually doing is pattern matching. It read an enormous library of things that humans have written, and it pattern matches to, you give it a prompt and it can complete it the way it might. That's basically just a more sophisticated version of what was done in the past. You could do like look at the last 10 letters or the last 10 words or something, and what's statistically most likely to be the next one that follows it, and you could write things that look vaguely grammatical that way, but they took it many levels of sophistication above that, and now it actually analyzes the whole style of how people write, and what they're writing about and what they're likely to say about it, and building a huge database of facts that might get put into it. And so you tell it to write, and it completes the pattern of what it thinks a human would write if asked the same thing. And it usually makes sense. It may or may not be true, but it makes sense. Usually gets basic facts right. But like arithmetic or what the capital of Florida is or something. But it's,
yeah,
I mean,
Daniel, they're much further along in that. Amazon, Jeff Bezos and Amazon, the Washington Post, have an algorithm where an editor can type in a query that says, give me a 750-word article on why, XYZ is a traitor, why this person is a traitor. And the machine will spit out a 750-word article presenting the best arguments available as to why this person is a traitor. Now Amazon ran 500 of these articles written by this computer algorithm in 2016. And they ran 500 of these articles, and these 500 articles received more than 500,000 likes. And no one knew that they were written by a human. Now, what this does is when you think about the malleability of the human brain, you think about the fact that, the vast majority of information is coming through our subconscious outside of our conscious awareness, and you think about this algorithm. So today, if I'm the editor of a newspaper, or yesterday, if I were the editor of a newspaper, and I went to you and I said, Daniel, write me a 750-word article on why John Doe is a traitor, you might say, I'm not going to write that article because I have moral qualms about writing that article because I don't think that that person is a traitor, right? So you might refuse me. You might refuse to write that article. Well, today, if I've got that algorithm, I don't need you. I don't need a journalist. I don't need a writer.
Get it as the editor of the Mensa chapter newsletter and put me out of my.
Yeah. I mean, you just type it in and it gives you the article that you want. So think about, some billionaire despot that decides to flood social media with computer generated articles that are making the case that he wants to make. I mean, all of this is technologically possible today.
It may be happening.
And it may be happening. Amazon is attempting to license that technology to, papers around the country. So look at the New York Times. The New York Times,
with them laying off journalists all over the place, then
they're laying off key journalists who are not willing to engage in critical theory with regard to liberal causes, And
yeah, just tell it to write an op-ed column that's 100% politically correct, and the AI will.
yeah, absolutely.
Correct. That's a strong word, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
Correct by the standards of whoever's asking for
Yeah.
Yeah, who says it's
Exactly.
correct?
it. Yeah.
I have one quick question. Have you been on Book TV?
I have not.
I
would
wish you
love to.
would.
I would
Yeah.
love to. You know who does it?
It's C-SPAN, but I don't really have any other information. It's on
Okay.
C-SPAN 2, I think.
Okay, is it like booktv.com?
Oh,
I'll look it
I
up.
just know what it's on. You know, it's on TV. I don't
I'll look
know.
it up. I hadn't
that
heard
part
of it. I haven't heard of it.
I think you should. Book TV. Yeah, they have all different kinds of mostly reality books, and actually too many political books, in my opinion. But they do have other sources also. Authors get on and they discuss their book, and it's usually, well, it could be something like you're describing. It wouldn't be fiction. Very rarely do they have any fiction on it. So yeah, I think it would be wonderful.
I'll follow up. I'll follow up.
So I can.
Okay, has everybody asked their questions other than Richard, who'll go offline and talk directly to George?
Cindy, can you send me a link?
Okay, everybody, remember his website is George J. Chanos, just like his name, with the J middle initial at .com.
Yeah,
all kinds of
.com. GeorgeJChanos.com or gjchanos@gmail.com.
And on the website, you can download the book that he referred to earlier. And I would like to close with my favorite quote that I heard today and also read in your book from Frank Zappa.
Yes.
Mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it's not open. That is a fabulous line, and it's so true. And it permeates your entire presentation today to keep the mind open.
Yes. Absolutely. And Cindy, thank you so much for organizing this and inviting me, and I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed it.
We certainly appreciate your presence and your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, George.
Right. Well, thank you, everyone. Please tell people
everybody.
about the book, and if they need a speaker or a Zoom speaker, I'm available.
Don't turn your phone off because you're going to get a lot of calls.
Good.
George, do you mind if I send you another Zoom invite?
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Richard, I want to be on it too.
Okay.
Who was that? I have no idea who that was.
I'll send you her email.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
I can't do it this evening, but I can do it at another time. So just send me an email. Send me an email to gjchanos@gmail.com, and we'll schedule another Zoom with anyone that wants to participate.
All right. And then Cindy,
Cindy, thank you for doing this.
Parisha, I'll send you and Richard each other's emails, and I want to be on that too, Richard.
No problem. George, thank you so much.
All right.
Absolutely.
All
Thank
right,
you.
George. Y'all, everybody have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.